Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Both the presidential and gubernatorial elections were in play locally this week as Donald Trump came to town for a fundraiser. Gubernatorial candidate Jeff Landry got publicity by association. Trump got the payday. Dollars are on the minds of New Orleans property owners as they await possibly frightening numbers from new assessments, though the City Council is hoping to provide some relief. There are two major development projects being promised. One is an expansion of leisure riverfront activity downriver from the quarter. The other will display the rituals and ways that the city celebrates death. Giving life to those stories, plus the latest on the New Orleans Police Superintendent selection, are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Stephanie Riegel, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Ben Myers, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and Gabriella Killett, also the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate staff writer. Okay, Stephanie, let's go on over to you because Audubon Institute has announced big plans for the riverfront heading downriver.
Really crucial part of the downtown riverfront. They unveiled long-awaited plans to redevelop the old Esplanade and Governor Nichols Street wharves, which are right there at the foot of Esplanade Avenue. It's about a third of a mile stretch. And what they want to do is take those two wharves and transform them into open green space with an elevated promenade, with some sheds that could be used for community gatherings and events, and then continue the riverfront multi-use trail that goes from Crescent Park all the way connecting to the Moonwalk. And this crucial piece of that stretch would be redeveloped so that you would have a 2.25 mile contiguous walkway along the riverfront. And this has been a dream of city leaders for a long time. The ball got rolling under Mitch Landry. Of course, his father, Moon Landry, started it all with the Moonwalk in the 70s. The city had entered into a CEA with the Audubon Institute back in 2018 to do this. The project got delayed because of COVID. So this was supposed to happen a couple of years ago, but August 5th or 4th is the deadline for Audubon to present their plans to the city, and they unveiled them last week at a community meeting, or Monday night at a community meeting. Got pretty high marks from community stakeholders, neighborhood activists who have been following this pretty closely. They were concerned about some initial plans that Audubon had unveiled at the beginning that called for maybe a big giant Ferris wheel or an amphitheater, something that would have attracted huge crowds, been very commercial. The neighborhood people really liked this plan because of the green space, because it was something that locals could really enjoy, and it would be great for the riverfront. There are still questions about how it will be paid for, both construction funding and long-term operational funding, because when it got started, the price tag was $15 million. Audubon has all that money liquid, ready to write the check. But now they estimate the construction costs will be at least $30 million. Yeah. And it's not really clear where that money is going to come from.
No, everything's just keeps going up.
You know, New Orleans was founded in 1718 along the river. And it wasn't until the 1970s that New Orleanians were able to use the river for leisure, because all the while there were things, there was levees, there was warehouses, there was do not enter signs and all. And so finally in the 70s, I think the Moonwalk was one of the things with the coming of the World's Fair in the 80s that encouraged things. Yep. And so that was when New Orleans started saying, hey, there's a river there, you know. And the fact is, not only is it a river, but it's really one of the great riverfronts in the world. I mean, it's one of a big, old, important river with that huge curve right there. And you know what? It's higher than the people are. I mean, it's difficult to find a river. Like you go to St. Louis, you go on this hill and you look way down there, there's a river, okay? But in New Orleans, you kind of like look up at the river, and it's quite a sight.
Oh, it's amazing.
And to expand it and to bring more people, I mean, it's really something special.
So this will just really continue that walk like Waldenburg
Right, because
Park.
so you start actually with Spanish Plaza and Waldenburg Park, and that's controlled by the aquarium. Then you have the whole strip with the Moonwalk, which is actually controlled by the French Market Corp. Then you've got these warehouses, that's Audubon, and then you've got about a mile of Crescent Park, which I don't know how many locals really avail themselves of Crescent Park, but it's fabulous. And then it ends with that Rainbow Bridge at the edge of the Bywater. So the other question with respect to the funding is with respect to ongoing operation and maintenance, safety, lights, keeping the grass cut, all of that kind of stuff. And of course, if there was a big tacky commercial attraction there, that would help pay for it. In the absence of that, Audubon's going to have to work with the community, with the city, to find ways to pay for it.
Now, they've gone out to community meetings and veiled it, and as you said, so far it really looks like there is support for it, unlike with Waldenburg. I don't know if you recall, but there was a lot of opposition to what was planned for Waldenburg, and there it is, and it's really been used, and everybody does enjoy it. So right now, the community is liking what they see?
And I can't speak for the whole community,
Obviously
but
not.
the sense in talking to key people who have been following this all along and have been very active in it, they are cautiously optimistic. But the devil's always in the details, and so it's going to be how they come up with revenue generators to pay for it. You know, there was talk of pop-up vendors, food trucks doing small-scale little music concerts that would bring maybe 2,000 people. But if you have a lot more than that, and you have crowds and noise, then you get into some problem territory.
Right.
So that remains to be seen.
Because as much as we enjoy the green space, that does not generate revenue.
No, and
for
so they have to
sustaining
come
it.
up with something. And I'll just say real quick, one possibility on the table is some revenue sharing with the French Market Corporation, which owns those parking lots at the foot of Elysian Fields Avenue. And they've been talking to French Market about developing those lots, maybe say a multi-story garage that would have something on the ground floor, and that way everybody could get a little bit of what they need, and Audubon could share some of the money, French Market could share some of the money. That's a possibility.
So more accessibility for the riverfront for us to enjoy. That does sound good.
And it's going to be a while. This isn't going to happen overnight, right? So we're talking a 2-year construction process at the least, and a lot of permitting and details that have to be worked out before they can start.
Okay. All right, Stephanie. Thanks a lot. Ben, over to you. And we are just hearing, wails of terrible remorse and anxiety over tax assessments that are coming in right now. In Orleans Parish, people are just really getting shocked by what they're seeing.
Yeah. So the assessor, Errol Williams, says that on average, assessments in this quadrennial citywide reassessment have spiked 23% on average. There are plenty of anecdotal reports of assessments going much higher, and I sense that they're concentrated in certain neighborhoods, Lakeview, Uptown, Lower Garden District being some of them, where you're getting north of 50% and even higher. How widespread that is sort of undetermined. The average, according to the assessor, is 23%.
And so how has the assessor come up with these averages and increases?
So it's a very good question. It's a very complicated methodology where he determines fair market value. He uses something called CAMA, which is, forget exactly what that stands for, but it's a mass appraisal technique. But essentially, they're taking property values in certain neighborhoods and then doing curbside views and coming up with a price, or an appraisal, I should say.
So if someone, is saying, wait a minute, this is way too much, what's happened here? Can they appeal it?
Yeah. So through August 18th, they can walk into the assessor's office. There's 3 locations, and meet with staff and get a 10-minute meeting. And oftentimes it does result in a reduction. Now, if they do that, they should come prepared with documentation and other kinds of evidence, maybe what their assessment is compared to their neighbors. But anything to strengthen their argument as to why it's too high. And the assessor says they take all that very seriously, and they're very happy to reduce when they're wrong.
And didn't you say in your article that the estimated increase is about 23%?
Yes, 23%. That's right.
Yeah, that's a considerable
average,
hike.
yeah.
But some, even higher. All right, tell us, what is sales chasing?
Sales chasing is a prohibited practice, prohibited by the Louisiana Tax Commission, in which a single home that was recently sold is assessed or appraised solely on the sales price. And the reason why this is forbidden is because it creates sort of an uneven playing field with people who come in and buy a home and their neighbors. So if you buy at $300,000, you're automatically appraised at $300,000, even if your neighbors are still at $200,000.
And so that's not allowed.
It's not allowed. The tax commission says you can't do it. Assessor Williams has been accused of doing this. He's long denied these accusations in the last go-around, in the last quadrennial assessment, which was complicated for a number of reasons. It wasn't even a complete citywide reassessment. But both the Louisiana Legislative Auditor and the Bureau of Governmental Research say they found evidence that he had done this.
Okay, now council's not too happy about this, and they called him before them to explain what's going on here.
That's right. Mr. Williams appeared before the council for an hour and a half and took all the questions and explained as best he could. I think, frankly, people probably came away from that still feeling confused as to how it all works. It's a difficult thing to explain, but that's right. The council's they called him in, and then they passed a resolution asking the Louisiana Legislative Auditor and the Tax Commission to come back and review all his work.
All right. So the assessor, as I recall, said that he was going to appeal his own assessment for his own property.
That's the other thing that came out of his appearance before council. He just said flatly that he didn't agree with the assessment on his own property that his office had conducted. There's a special his office does assess his own property, and there's a special process by which the tax commission will then verify that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the partial solution to this is the rollbacks.
So it's very important to understand that taxes don't necessarily increase just because assessments increase. The millage rates automatically roll back by state law, and they roll back to the extent to which revenue remains neutral, so nobody will pay more. The taxing bodies then have the option to roll it back to the existing rates and reclaim additional revenue, but that's on the taxing bodies, not on the assessor. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see where it goes. Now, how are people showing up at the assessor's office to appeal?
I think the assessor's office would say they're not really showing up, but I think that's kind of undetermined. I'm actually waiting on some numbers maybe to illustrate that, so we'll see.
Okay, all right, Ben, thanks a lot. Gabby, over to you. And the New Orleans police superintendent search continues, but there was some information of maybe it being winnowed down a little bit.
Yes, so we are expecting reports hopefully by Monday, but definitely next week. The city is saying of recommendations on at least 3 finalists from the current 6 semifinalists that we have from the search to be presented to the mayor next week, and then at that point she will make a recommendation to council after she conducts her own interviews and whittles that down appropriately, and then they go through a confirmation process.
So how many layers are actually looking at this? I mean, how many committees or groups or whatever are going to be coming up with recommendations to give to the mayor?
So I would say that it would be appropriate to say that there are 3 separate entities or groups that are looking at this. You have the International Association of Police Chiefs, who was paid $90,000 to conduct the national search. They began months ago, prompted by former Superintendent Sean Ferguson's resignation, and they came up with these 6 semifinalists. And now they have just completed interviews late last week with 2 separate groups. One is an external stakeholders committee, the city is calling it, and the other is an internal stakeholders committee, which consists of city officials. The external stakeholders are people that were selected by the IACP to participate in the process, and they have said that they are people who are faith leaders, community leaders. They come from all walks of the city to come and interview these candidates, and are now working on making recommendations to the mayor.
So we did hear about the recommendation from the external stakeholders, but this was not anything formal right, that has been submitted yet.
Yes, that is true. So sources are telling us that the external stakeholders have whittled down their own recommendations. That includes the current interim Superintendent Michelle Woodfork and Kirkpatrick, who was a former police chief in Oakland, and another gentleman, I'm forgetting his name right now, Diedrich Andres, excuse me, and he was the former police chief in Henderson. But that is not an official recommendation yet. That is expected to come by Monday.
Okay. Council's reaction to all of this has not really been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, I have heard from at least 2 council members. Of Helena Moreno issued a statement, and I spoke with Joe Geruso personally, and both of them have similar sentiments. They're just feeling like they don't feel confident inserting a vote for anyone without full understanding of the way that the process came to be. That's to say, how did the IACP whittle the 33 people who made application for this job into the 6 that we now have. So they're requesting that information in hopes of having a clearer view of how we got to this point in the process before they're able to cast votes or feel comfortable doing so.
So council has not seen even that full that list of 33 who applied? They don't know who these people are?
So what I have been told is that the IACP is not communicating directly with council because they don't consider the council their client. They have said that the city is their client, and presumably for them that means the mayor's office. And because of that, they have refused as of yet to meet with council so far in this process, because they're just saying that they aren't their direct client. And I'm not completely sure about their perspective there, but that's what I'm hearing.
That's amazing. This money would have been appropriated by the council, or was it paid for by some separate grant? I wonder. That was like
the $90,000 that the IACP was. Do we know that who did pay for it?
I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not sure.
So what then are some of these council members who have been vocally complaining? What are they saying then? How would that potentially impact their approval, confirmation of the candidate that the mayor puts forth?
I mean, it's really quite obvious at this point. Helena Moreno did write in her letter she will vote no for whoever the mayor presents if she doesn't receive that information of the preliminary stages of the search process from IACP. So, she made it extremely clear in her statement, and Joe Geruso alluded to a similar, outcome for himself. So it's hard to say exactly until we're really at the table and we have everybody, doing the confirmation process. But so far, it seems like we have at least 2 council members who will not participate until that information is handed to them.
How much longer will this process go on? I think, Ben, you reported on something on that, didn't you?
Well, the mayor, the last thing that she said publicly is that she might get some finalists, up to 3 maybe, within maybe 2 weeks. But she wouldn't be, she wasn't steadfast about the 2-week time frame. And then after that, she'll make a decision whenever it's time to make a decision. She explicitly said that she refuses to be boxed in by a commitment on this.
Okay. All right. So more waiting then. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. E, over to you. We had a visit by an important politician to
It was a quick
the area.
visit. Donald Trump came into town on Wednesday. He flew in on the Trump jet. And of course, when you come to New Orleans, when you're running for president, the first thing you do is go get beignets. And so they went to the French Quarter, and he went to got a bag of donuts and some coffee, and then he came back. There seems to be a strategy, kind of like beignet politics. You get beignets, you kind of show like you're one of the people. Okay? And then at that point, he went to Metairie, to Joseph Canizaro's house. That's in the neighborhood of where Metairie Country Club is. And supposedly the tickets were around $23,000, and they hope to raise $2 million, and they think they did it. So it seems like it was time well spent. And then he left. Among the candidates for governor, he's endorsed Jeff Landry. They've known each other, and so Jeff Landry was there. I tell you, I think the beignets got more news coverage than Jeff Landry did. Okay, but at least it's kind of good for him to be there, and it was part of it. But speaking of Landry, though, who's still very much a front runner in the polls. He has started what they call that third wave of campaigns. So he has a heavy TV campaign narrated by his wife, just talking about what a good guy he is. And then Sharon Hewitt, who's a legislator from the North Shore, has started a campaign too. She's using the grandma approach. She says, I'm a grandmother, but I work hard and I've show up wearing a hard hat. And so she's doing it too. And then Lundy, Hunter Lundy, has had some spots too. He's very much of a fundamentalist, and he's doing this thing called about pretty much religious righteousness and using that kind of approach. So you're starting to see the beginnings of it. Again, August 8th is qualifying day. I think after that it's going to really take off, and then really take off after Labor Day. Labor Day is really, the starting point.
So the Trump visit was a real sort of quick in and out. Were there any crowds outside to either protest or cheer him on?
There were some demonstrators. I don't think there were a whole lot. I drove by actually before that. I didn't see a lot. I heard that there were some, but I don't think any point came across. As part of his meeting, though, some people were allowed, who were guests there, I mean, who paid tickets, were allowed to pay extra and have like a back and forth with him and to bring up their issues. So.
And there were some folks out at the airport to meet him, too, who were lucky enough to meet him, and some real Trump fans had their pictures taken with him.
Yeah, well, there's a strong Republican population in New Orleans, and in the neighborhood where they were is probably the epicenter of Republican life in Louisiana, and so it's easy to get people.
Yeah. All righty. Thanks a lot. Stephanie, back over to you. Another potential project that may be happening is the City of the Dead. Now, what is this going to be exactly?
Well, it's going to be an attraction, as it was explained to me, dedicated to sort of the culture around New Orleans history and traditions of burying its dead above ground in those very interesting cemeteries that people come from all over to see, and also traditions like the second line. So it's a joint venture between Barry Kern Studios, the Mardi Gras people, and developer Joe Yeager. Yeager has been working on this since at least 2017. It's going to be located right next to St. Louis Cemetery number 1 on Basin Street in a 3-story building that was part of the old Iberville housing development. Most of that was torn down, as you remember, but this particular building, which is sort of the classic red brick 3-story building, couldn't be razed because they found some human remains under it that, based on some articles we wrote at the time, I think were actually maybe part of St. Louis Cemetery 1. That portion of Basin Street was part of Storyville. So first it was St. Louis number 1, and then I guess part of it was redeveloped to Storyville, and then after that they tore those houses down and it became part of the Iberville housing complex. So that area has had quite a fabled past, but this building couldn't be torn down, so Hanno, which owns it, tried to work some sort of deal with Yeager to take it over and to develop it and turn it into a moneymaker, and he brought Kern on board, and they've come up with this idea to create not a strictly historical museum, but something that I guess would be a more family-friendly and not so macabre version of those museums. Like there's a death museum in the French Quarter that gets pretty adult rated, and this would be much more, as they said several times, family friendly and historical, but not strictly historical. They mentioned that it would have an escape room and could be rented out for events, and would give people just more of a look and feel for why we have second lines and why we bury our dead above ground in the olden days, and the history of throwing a little Marie Laveau and voodoo. And so that's the plan at this point. It's been fully permitted by the city, so it appears that it's ready to go, but I don't know.
Yeah, and of course we've always called our cemeteries cities of the dead.
I think Mark Twain maybe coined the term.
If you think about the death culture that we have, and the we celebrate a big Mardi Gras, but what is Mardi Gras but the prelude to Ash Wednesday? And Ash Wednesday is ashes to ashes and part of that.
Sure.
And then the whole scene with the second lines. I mean, the second lines originated as part of the funeral marches, and then also our cemeteries where they're above ground. Most cities it's below ground that you see the burial places because of the water table. So we have a very visible business of death presence.
And think about this, a related story that I wrote earlier this week is, the Archdiocese, which owns the cemeteries, has limited access to St. Louis Cemetery number 1 and limited to just a single tour group. So there's demand that people want to get in there. I mean, they still can if they go through this particular tour group, but there are people that want to learn about this. There's a hunger for it. And so if you can't maybe give a tour of or get into St. Louis Cemetery number 1, you can go to the museum. And
of course, there's Lafayette Cemetery too. Is that even open now to the public? Do you know?
I don't know.
But that's another one too that tourists love to go see. So regarding the building, real quick, Hanno still owns the building. Did they sell it, or
they entered into a 99-year lease with Kern and Yeager. The building is going to stand, but the plans call for renovating it and turning it into this museum/attraction/venue.
Okay. And
new air conditionings and new insides and everything. No time frame yet for a groundbreaking or a completion.
It's just an idea that is out there, a little bit more than an idea, because it's permitted
like I said,
too.
it's fully permitted. Like if you went online, you could read all about it, but they just, they haven't really fully given us the time frame yet.
All right, Steph, thanks. Other stories, E, over to you.
We're well into the Creole tomato season, which is something that you shouldn't ignore because the real good Louisiana Creole. Now, there are a lot of different things, tomatoes that claim to be Creole, but if you want the real thing, get the tomatoes that are grown in Plaquemines Parish or St. Bernard Parish, fresh off the vine. They're really good.
Nothing like a Creole tomato.
Right.
Yeah, and Ian McNulty recently had a story about the real Creole tomato sandwich. Oh,
a tomato sandwich
really made you want one. Yeah.
Which you eat on white bread.
On white bread, exactly. Okay, Steph, over to you.
We've been talking about insurance rates all year and the impact that has on real estate. We have a story coming out Sunday that takes a look at how all this is impacting home sale prices and the residential real estate market through the first half of the year. And as you might expect, the numbers aren't good.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking for that, Steph. Thanks. Ben?
I would keep an eye on the intensifying rhetoric around encampments, homelessness encampments. A couple of ordinances died in committee this week, but I think they're going to come back, and the rhetoric is heating up.
Okay. Gabby?
If y'all remember, there was a fatal shooting of a young mother in May. Her name is Asia Davis. I received the 911 dispatch notes and audio on that call, and there's some revelatory facts that came out of that, so stay tuned.
Okay, great reporting from all of you guys that we'll be looking forward to, and thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.